Both Red Bull and Ferrari want Formula One's rule makers to talk about how crash damage should be accounted for, as both teams are facing large repair expenditures and grid penalties as a result of other drivers' mishaps. Formula One has recently put in place a 2021 Formula One budget cap rule. This means that the rules restrict spending, allowing smaller teams to have a chance to compete with those top teams such as Mercedes and Ferrari. In today's video, we are going to take a look at Formula One's new budget cap rules, along with the cost of crashing and the implications that come along with that. F1's new budget cap rules. Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull have a stranglehold on the top of the Formula One standings and have so for years, thanks to vast budgets. New restrictions, however, limit spending, and smaller teams now believe they can compete. Formula One adopted a budget cap for 2021, which was set at $145 million this season in the wake of the epidemic, and will shrink to $135 million by 2023 after a years-long debate over costs. This is forcing massive cuts at F1's three biggest teams, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull Racing, whose annual spending had surged beyond $400 million each, with each team employing over 1,000 people. It is, however, a lifeline for the series' other 7 teams, which often spent half or even a third as much as the top 3, and were virtually doomed to stay in the midfield, according to Alpine Racing CEO Laurent Rossi. The lesser teams faced a twofold problem. First, while they could handle the basics of competing, such as tires, fuel, and team travel, they don't have much money to spend on creating and testing their cars or hiring problem-solving engineers. There have been years where we had $5 million, $6 million, and I am sure the others had hundreds of millions, says Otmar Zafnauer, CEO of the newly rebranded Aston Martin Cognizant, one of the F1 smaller teams with approximately 550 personnel. The powerful brands that own the top teams, on the other hand, chalked off the exorbitant fees as a marketing investment, ensuring that their logos were plastered on TV screens. On the revenue side, F1 used a model that saw successful teams receive far more money from items like television rights and race hosting costs than teams at the bottom of the standings. Sponsors were also wary of collaborating with teams who couldn't consistently place their drivers on the podium. The lesser teams dropped farther in the standings without a war chest to update their cars. It was a feedback loop that Manor and Force India, both of which went bankrupt, and Lotus, which was forced to sell for pennies on the dollar, couldn't break free from. The problem had taken on a life of its own. The new cost cap, which was announced in October of last year, aims to create a more competitive championship, promote a fair playing field, and assure the financial stability and long-term viability of Formula One's 10 teams. Since then, the coronavirus epidemic has had a massive impact around the world, prompting F1 stakeholders to propose additional revisions to the financial regulations in order to future-proof the championship. So, why has it been lowered? The coronavirus epidemic has prompted the postponement of the 2020 Formula One season, putting a severe financial pressure on the 10 F1 teams. As a result, all of the teams, along with F1 and the FIA, have come to the table to collaborate on methods to reduce a team's expenditures, particularly short-term running costs, in order to improve long-term viability. One such action was to push out the release of the new concept car from 2021 to 2022, with teams continuing to race their 2020 cars into 2021. Because the larger teams and budgets were likely to spend up to the former budget ceiling of $175 million because it was within the regulations, the decision was made to lower the threshold even further in order to significantly minimize operating costs. While F1's larger teams, which are funded by global OEMs, may have to reconsider their involvement in the sport and in motorsport in general as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, it is hoped that the permanent reduction in the cost cap will assist teams in making long-term decisions to stay at F1. How will the cap be regulated? A cost cap administration will be established to ensure that the financial regulations are followed. Here's a link to a more extensive explanation. Several teams have expressed an interest in participating in a soft implementation period, also known as a mock run, this year to assist identify and resolve any issues with their financial reporting systems and processes. Since then, rule makers have improved the regulations' compliance monitoring and enforcement systems. This allows the FIA to visit an F1 team's factory during the season to confirm that the proper systems are in place to comply with financial regulations. The cost of crashing. Red Bull head Christian Horner warned the expense of repairs will be brutal under F1's new budget constraint after both his cars were severely damaged in the Lap 1 incident in Hungary. So what are the ramifications for the teams now that they must budget for the cost of repairing damaged cars? The cost cap, which goes into effect in 2021, restricts teams to spending no more than $147.5 million each year, with some exceptions. After the second race in a row in which Red Bull's cars were severely damaged, after Max Verstappen collided with Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone with a repair bill of $1.8 million before the double whammy in Hungary, where both Verstappen and Sergio Perez's cars were hit at turn 1, Horner bemoaned the impact on his team. Hugely frustrating, obviously, brutal under the cost cap, and just, I think, reaffirms when you have an incident that isn't yours, we're paying the price for that, and that's something that isn't budgeted for, he said. Facts about the new budget cap. For years, the technical and sporting laws of Formula One have been written out in two documents. In 2021, however, the teams will be subject to financial laws for the first time. The adoption of the $145 million cost cap, which was originally set at $175 million but was reduced to lessen the economic impact of the COVID-19 epidemic. Here are the major effects of the financial laws on Formula One that you should be aware of moving into the season. Teams must show their workings. The cost cap is not honor-based, and teams must determine and disclose their relevant costs to the FIA. This means teams will have to be honest about their expenses and ensure that everything that contributes towards the cost cap is included, with a slew of rules governing how those should be calculated in circumstances when services are provided by other companies or departments within a larger group. If there is any suspicion of foul play, these filings can be audited and probed. Parts may become harder to manage. F1 teams are accustomed to meticulously monitoring components and spares, but the cost cap might affect spares availability and possibly even part life. While this will have no effect on safety, it may mean that at the conclusion of the season, teams will be running tired components or would be short on spares. Last year, Haas was operating on a shoestring budget with only 2 chassis remaining after Romain Grosjean's was destroyed in a shunt at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Ben Agathangelou, Haas's chief aerodynamicist, outlined in December how the company's condition last year could be a sign of things to come. The car's getting quite tired, he told the race between the 2 Bahrain races. We haven't got a plethora of spares and there's a lot of fix and repair by necessity. We were having to hold on for a long time this year. So you inevitably lose an element of performance in just that wear and tear, which we're also generally not accustomed to in this sport. I think it's going to become more apparent once we see a budget cap environment that there will be a bit more longevity drawn from the componentry, but it's a first example for us. Rules breaks will be punished. While several sports with similar rules punish infractions exclusively with monetary penalties, the cost cap adjudication panel, which will examine cases of financial rule violations in Formula One, has broader powers, including the ability to give protection to whistleblowers. Financial fines and numerous reprimands are possible in this sport, as they are in many others with similar limits. There's also the possibility of lowering the offender's spending cap in future seasons. There is also the option of deducting championship points, limiting aerodynamic testing, banning teams, or even disqualifying them from the competition. Individuals and teams can both be subjected to sanctions. These restrictions, as F1 Managing Director Ross Brown put it, have teeth. The only concern is whether the championship will be willing to employ them if a significant breach occurs. And there you have it. Everything you need to know about Formula One and their new budget cap they have decided to implement. Along with this, we have delved into rules surrounding this budget cap, along with just how expensive a crash can be in Formula One. Even though $147 million sounds like a huge sum of money, when it comes to Formula One and how much these big teams spend, this is definitely a sizable cutback. But tell us your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss any of our new and upcoming content. Thanks for watching.